Push is the topic for today. So thanks for joining for what is actually the last webinar of this year. So today we have Lars Burgess, who's like the godfather of RhoConnect, is the lead for our RhoConnect software. So he's going to go through a complete tutorial demonstration and discuss particularly about RhoConnect Push, a fairly new feature of the product, which is quite useful. So we're going to cover that. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just to talk about what's coming up with our webinar series, and then at the end of the session, we'll just hit a quick resource of the week. Again, just some housekeeping. If you need to ask the questions via GoToMeeting, so we can capture everything that is asked, and please leave me some feedback when you exit the webinar. We're starting to make our plans for next year in terms of what our webinar series are going to look like in terms of frequency and content. So if you can kindly leave me some feedback, that would be much appreciated. So webinars, we've done some fairly interesting webinars the past few weeks. They're all up on Launchpad or developer.motorolasolutions.com. Last week we covered what's new in RhoMobile Suite 2.2. We just released that this past week or so, and that's also available for download on Launchpad. But if you'd like to hear Adam Blum, the product manager, talk about the release and walk through some demonstrations on some new JavaScript features, watch the replay. It's up there and it's available. Next week, actually I did say this is the last one of the year. I misstated that. Next week I'm going to do one more webinar before we end the year out, and I'm going to walk through some native extension tutorials. And this is really, I say it's a 101 webinar. It is a more advanced subject, but I'm not going to get too deep on it. I know a lot of beginners are joining the webinars, so I want to walk through a native extension tutorial. And this is where if there's an API or something you want to access at the system level that's outside of the scope of RhoMobile Suite, it allows you to extend operating system capabilities and device capabilities that we may not provide. So I'll walk through how to set that up and the tool that we provide inside of RhoMobile to make that easier. And so that should be a good session. Next, we'll take a couple of weeks off for the holidays and the end of the year. And then we'll probably start the webinars up in mid-January again. And right now we're looking like we're going to not do these every week. We're going to change the frequency, probably more so along the lines of once a month. But I'm going to collect some feedback from the committee on that before we make that decision. But anyway, so stay tuned. One more for next week, and then the next one will not be until the middle of January. So. Okay, so let me hand it over to Lars. Lars, thanks for joining today. Let me give you the presenter. Thank you, presenter here. All right, there we go. I see your screen.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Yeah, my name is Lars Burgess. I'm the Director of Server Engineering for RhoMobile Product Suite. You can follow me on Twitter here at Lars Burgess. So as Rob mentioned, today I'm going to be discussing a new feature of RhoConnect that was just released with 3.4, corresponding to the RhoMobile Suite 2.2 release. It's called RhoConnect Push. So RhoConnect Push is a new server, actually, that we ship with the RhoConnect product. It's a data push server. It's not like an email sync server or anything like that. It's for doing generic data push and push messaging. Why did we create the RhoConnect Push server? Well, just like mobile platforms, generic data push is a fragmented space. You have, for example, on Android, the Google Cloud Messaging solution. Apple has, of course, their Apple Push Notification Service. BlackBerry has two different forms of push. They have Bez PAP push, and they also have BlackBerry Internet Service push. Android also used to have this push service called Cloud to Device Messaging, which they've now officially deprecated. And then, of course, you have Windows Mobile and Windows Embedded, which didn't really have a push solution. They had some kind of workaround systems that were not very reliable using SMS and so forth. So trying to integrate push messaging into your mobile application has been a fragmented experience. If you wanted to have an application written for iOS and Android, you had to deal with two different types of push technologies and setting it up and all that. And so setup is usually pretty complicated for using these features. For Android, you've got a lot of different permissions and settings you have to put into your application, a lot of signing with iOS. You have to set up special certificates and keys. And the BlackBerry Push service is extremely complex. You have to run your own server, and it's not an easy task. You can't, for example, just take an existing BlackBerry device and use Push with it without a lot of overhead and setup. So RhoConnect does help with this. We do make it easy to integrate to existing push technologies. We currently support Apple Push Notification Service, BlackBerry Push, Google Cloud Messaging. We did support C2DM until it was officially deprecated by Google. So it is simple within RhoConnect to actually send push messages, but you still have to deal with all the different setup processes. You have to deal with setting up your Apple certificates or your Google account and that sort of thing. So we were faced with this problem. We were trying to think of a way to have an easy way to do cross-platform push. So you have one API and one setup across multiple platforms. Another reason is a lot of customers and a lot of use cases involve having devices that are behind the firewall. They don't have access to the internet. So for example, Google Cloud Messaging requires you to be able to talk to Google servers and have a Google account set up on the device. So for a lot of scenarios, if you're inside of an enterprise scenario where you don't have unlimited internet access or any internet access at all, that's just not an option. So the RhoConnect Push service was created to solve this problem. You can basically run a very simple or very lightweight service along with your RhoConnect application. It is a separate server that runs on a different port, but what it does is it'll facilitate sending push messages to a RhoConnect Push client. And currently we support Android, Windows Mobile, Windows CE, and Windows. We do have other platforms on the way. As you can see, we've got what we'd like to do is get some testing for the RhoConnect Push service out in the field and see what platforms are really, what people really want to see support for. But what you do get with RhoConnect Push is you get behind the firewall push. You don't need any internet connectivity, and you can still send push messages from your RhoConnect application to the device. It makes using RhoConnect with what we call push sync or triggered sync a very compelling feature, because now you don't have to keep pulling for data. You can rely on push to tell the devices to wake up and synchronize their data. So RhoConnect Push is our first service that runs on Node.js. It's a new development platform that many of you are probably familiar with. It's written, so Node applications are written in JavaScript, and the RhoConnect Push server is written in JavaScript and runs as a Node.js application. So why did we pick Node.js? As you're familiar with RhoConnect, it's a Ruby application. It runs on Nginx, and we use Thin as a Ruby application server. Well, simply we chose Node because it's great at handling lots and lots of connections. Node is connection handling design lets us manage thousands or tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of open connections on a single server without much overhead, something that's just not possible to do in Ruby. So you can have 20,000 devices talking to the push server, and the push server will be just fine and will not get overloaded. We also chose it because it's good at handling simple connections, and we use a HTTP persistent connection to facilitate the push messages. So that way you can use existing wireless networks. It'll work fine over a 3G or 4G connection as well. So let's talk about why you would use the push server. What is the use case here? The most interesting use case we think is to use it for telling devices to synchronize. If you're writing your back-end application, you want to get updates to your devices as quickly as possible. You don't want them to have to pull on a certain interval or otherwise wait for the changes to come. So on that note, when the back-end system changes, if there's a, let's say I create a record or I update a record or delete a record, I want those changes to be immediately reflected on all the devices that care about it. So there's a series of steps that need to happen there. I need to know which devices to send the changes to, which user are the changes associated with. So I need to send a push message to all of those associated devices. Those of you who are not familiar with it, we do have a feature in RhoConnect called server plugins. In RhoConnect, there's essentially two ways to interact with your backend system. You can either write a source adapter, where you write some Ruby code that is installed into your RhoConnect application, and that manages querying for data, creating, updating, and deleting data with your backend system. Typically, it talks to a SOAP or REST service, but you can write a source adapter that can connect to anything like a file system or directly to a database if you wanted to. The other way to use RhoConnect is to not write any RhoConnect source adapters and just use it sort of as a black box server. And what you would do is you install a server plugin into your backend application. We support, we have server plugins for Ruby, which runs as a Rails plugin or a Sinatra plugin that sits on top of either Active Record or Data Mapper. In the example I'll show today, I'm going to show a Rails application using the plugin with Active Record. We also have a Java Spring MVC plugin, and then we have a .NET MVC plugin. So if you're building an application using ASP.NET MVC, you can use our plugin to interact with the RhoConnect server automatically for you. And the nice thing about this is it lets you just focus on building your backend application using existing skill sets. You don't have to go learn Ruby or learn a new tool set. You can just add it as another one of the many plugins that you probably already have in your backend application. So we talked about plugins, which is what I'm going to demo here. The other part of this feature is RhoConnect has a new feature in 3.4 that lets you automatically send push messages when there are changes to a source. So that works for both source adapters and for plugins. So if I'm updating a record for my product model, let's say, I can configure RhoConnect to automatically send push messages whenever that happens. And so this is kind of describing the flow. If my backend application has a model A and some change happens in the model, my plugin will automatically send that update to RhoConnect. And if I have push notified enabled, it'll send a push message through the RhoConnect push server to the device. Now, push notify also works with all of our other push technologies that we support, like Apple and Google Cloud Messaging and BlackBerry does. But in this scenario, I'm going to talk about RhoConnect Push so that you can see how it interacts with our new push service. And again, what will happen here is it will send this push message all the way to the device, and you can see in the last row here, this will trigger the device to synchronize the Model A. So the push message is very specific. It doesn't say, come synchronize everything. It'll say, something happened in Model A, so come fetch the changes for Model A. And enabling this push notify feature is very simple. You just, in your RhoConnect settings file, you can set it either at the top level section here. We have a development, test, and in production environments. You can set it here, or you can set it at a per source level. So if you just wanted the product model to send push notifications, you can enable it at the source level as well. Again, so this means that whenever there's a change, it's going to trigger a push message getting sent to the device. And again, so we want to have these changes propagate automatically. We don't want to have to worry about when the device last connected or when, how often to pull for changes. We just want it to work. Whenever our backend changes, we want to update these devices. So you can also use push notify with background jobs. A lot of customers like to use source adapters or execute their source adapter code inside of a background job. That's typically in case if your backend system is quite slow, or you know that doing certain tasks with your backend system are very CPU intensive or take a lot of time, you typically would use a background job to process that. And so we support that as well. If you're running a background job, let's say every night, you can send a push message when the background job is done. So now we'll go ahead and jump into a demo. And I'll start here. So what I've prepared is a simple Rails application, which is actually sort of a copy of our famous product store sample. And what it has is a single model in it called product. And what I've done here is I've used the RhoConnect RB plugin. And in order to use that, I just include this mix-in into my active record model. Now what this is going to do is it's going to add a bunch of automatic functionality to my model in the form of callbacks. So whenever a record is created, updated, or deleted, RhoConnect RB is going to go update the RhoConnect instance with the changes automatically. There's only two methods that I need to implement here. One is the partition. So this is essentially a mapping of how the data is scoped. You would typically, if you had a user authentication system in Rails, a common one is using the devise tool. I would do something like this so that I could associate whatever change is happening with the current user. In this case, I'm just going to have a hard-coded username because I don't have any user authentication system in this Rails app. So I'm just going to return the user Lars. Now the important thing here is when you're doing this test, and we'll post all this code online, when you run this test you have to log in with the same user because this is how the push message is going to get triggered for a specific user. The second method that I implement is called RhoConnect Query. This is just this is analogous to your source adapter query method. You just define the data set that's going to be synchronized here. In this case, I'm just going to return all of the products. I don't have to worry about anything. But if I wanted to return a smaller subset, I could use the partition that gets passed into this method. Let's say if I logged in as Lars, this would be the string Lars, and I could filter down the list of products I returned based on the user. So the second thing that I do here when I set up this plugin, and if you have it installed in your Rails application here, you'll see one of the rake tasks that it adds is called RhoConnect Setup. And if I just do rake-t here, I'll see that. So what this does is if I run this task, and I've already run it in this app, it will install an initializer. Now the initializer's job is to wire up this Rails application to my RhoConnect server. In this case, by default, it assumes your RhoConnect server is running on localhost, and you have a default token here. Of course, you'd want to change this when you deploy your app in production. The next is what it does is it tells the RhoConnect server where am I running, where is my backend app, and that's called this app endpoint. So you would just set this to, if it's a Rails app by default, it runs on localhost port 3000, but like if you're running a Tomcat app and it's Java, you would put like 8080 or something. And then the final thing is you define your authenticate block. So again, in using RhoConnect plugins, you don't put any logic in the RhoConnect application. Everything stays within your backend app. So instead of writing an authenticate method in my RhoConnect server, I implement this authenticate hook here. And so this way I have access to all of my models. If I was using an authentication system, I could do like user.authenticate right here in my Rails app. And I don't have to, I don't have to deal with anything specific to RhoConnect. I'm just continuing to use my normal Rails development skills here. But in this case, since I don't have any user system, I'm just going to return true, and that way any user can log in. So that's it on the Rails application side. I don't have to do any other configuration here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to what I've got here is a vanilla RhoConnect application that I've generated. I didn't add any source adapters to it. As you can see, it doesn't have any source adapters. It's just the default boilerplate code. I'm just going to change one setting, and that's in settings.yml. I'm going to enable push notify. So again, what this is going to do is it's going to tell the RhoConnect server whenever there's a change coming in, send a push message to all of the properly registered devices. And then all the changes that are coming into RhoConnect will automatically propagate to the devices. And that's it. I don't have to touch anything else in this RhoConnect app. It's just a vanilla app, and I'm going to start it up. So let's go ahead and start it. First, I need to start my RhoConnect server, and I'll do that with RhoConnect start the usual way. Okay, and then I'm going to start my Rails application, and I'll start that the usual way, just Rails S, which is short for Rails server. Now you can see here, if I go back to my RhoConnect server logs, you can see that there's this strange request here. What happened? What happened is when my Rails application started, the initializer that we showed here went and actually auto-configured my RhoConnect server with this app endpoint. And so I see this call here to this route called app server. Now I can verify that the app endpoint was set up correctly by going to my RhoConnect application's web console. Just go ahead and log in, and you can see here backend app URL is set to that value. And you want to make sure this is set up properly. This tells you that your RhoConnect application and your backend app, in this case a Rails app, can talk to each other properly. So that's a very important step to check when you are setting this up. So the next thing I'm going to do is I need to start the push server. So this is going to be, if you've installed the RhoMobile Suite, let me go ahead and I've got the installer here. When you install RhoMobile Suite, you can install on Mac, you can install it running this script. If you're using Windows, it'll automatically install if you have the default checked option for RhoConnect Push. This, on Mac, it does assume that you've set up Node.js beforehand. So I like to use Homebrew for installing all my packages. So that way I can just do brew install node, and it'll give me Node.js, and then I can install RhoConnect Push. So if I've already done that, if I just type RhoConnect Push now, I'll see what the default, if I do RhoConnect Push -- help, I'll see all of the options. There are several options here for configuring the server. You can just run it with the defaults, and it'll start up a server on port 8675, but you can also say I want to start on a different port. You can also configure the Redis connection. So RhoConnect Push also uses Redis as a data store, so it's important to make sure that whatever machine you're running the push server on, it also has Redis running. And then there's several other options here, for example, the timeout, which is how long the RhoConnect Push server allows a device to be offline before it says, okay, this device is timed out. And you can also put all of these options into a configuration file if you want to. For example, in production, you'd want to dump all these settings into a configuration file, and then you can start up the server, which is passing in that file. So I'm just going to run this server here with a debug level, and I like to specify the debug level 3, which will print out a lot of information, but it won't print out too much like all of the raw HTTP traffic. It'll just print out some useful info messages. And you can see here it shows me what all the default settings are. Shows me where my app server is, which is port 9292, my RhoConnect server. And then it's started up here on port 8675. So this is important that you make sure your RhoConnect server, if you're doing all of this on the same machine, your RhoConnect server is running on port 9292. You can also set which host and port it's running when you start the server. So now that I've got my 3 servers running, I'm going to go ahead and wire up a client application. So to do that, I'm going to go here to RhoStudio, and I'm sure you've seen this demo before. I'm just going to create a new project, call it RhoMobile Application, and we'll call this Store 3. Oops. Oh, I need to start RhoStudio again here. Okay, so go ahead and create my new application. Call it Store 3. Great. And so now what I'll do is there's a couple of things I need to set up. The first is I'm going to create my product model because I need to have a model in my mobile app to synchronize. So I'll go ahead and generate the product model. Great. So now it's generated this model. I need to enable sync just like I normally would. And then now what I need to do is, well, let me also change my home page, which I often forget to do. So that way I can actually go and view the model. Now what I need to do is I need to first enable the RhoConnect Push extension. We ship RhoConnect Push as a native extension for RhoElements, so I need to first enable that to tell my application, please include this extension when you build. And then I need to configure it. So there's 2 additional settings that I will add here to my RhoConfig file. The first setting is the normal one where if I want to use RhoConnect, I need to give it my sync server. So I need to grab my current IP address. So I'm going to actually be showing this on a Nexus S here. So I'll put my current IP address, and then I'm going to add the RhoConnect, and all of this information is in our documentation, RhoConnect Push server. And again, it's running on that default port of 8675. So it's different from the sync server. It's going to be this URL. Then I need to give it a unique token. So I do RhoConnect Push app name. And I'm just going to put the default, which is some app name. And you can change this app name if you want here in the settings file. It just has to match. So when I run the RhoConnect server, it's going to be talking to the push server using these credentials. This would be obviously something more secure when you deploy your application. So I've got all of that configured now, and I've got my push extension. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and build this application for Android. So I'll create a new run configuration here. When you build the Store 3, and again, I need to actually run this on a device because the simulator is quite slow, so I want to just go ahead and run it here on a device. And while that's running, if we have any, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them in the GoToWebinar question box, and we can answer them as they come in.
Yeah, hey Lars. While that's running, there were a couple of questions. One that actually is not in the queue, if you see the questions there, is about the synchronization frequency, right? So if we're doing push, I guess some thoughts around best practice, right? Would you recommend tuning the sync frequency to be less, obviously, because then if we're getting a push message to trigger that sync, you almost don't even need it to sync by itself. You know what I mean? what are some thoughts around just general best practices for configuring sync with push, sync without push, things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. You can actually, yeah, I would recommend either disabling the polling altogether or setting it to something very low, like maybe once a day
Yeah.
or once every other day. You don't need to have it set very high. The only thing I would say is if your data changes are critical, like you really need to make sure they get there, you'd want to have at least some poll interval just in case the push message didn't get delivered. So push, like RhoConnect Push, is no different from other push technologies in that there is no guarantee of arrival, so you can't. There would be a chance that the push message may get lost, and you have to send it again. So if your application it has very critical changes, you'd want to have at least some poll interval so the device would never just sleep forever.
Right. So yeah, take that into consideration. I see this as a way for the device to have longer battery life, obviously less network traffic, especially over, carrier networks where there's a cost factor, right?
Exactly.
This can really improve that. So make sure you have everything configured properly. Somebody else, you have are you ready to go to the next step? It looks like it's building.
I think so, yeah. Let me, I just wanted to start up my thing here. Let's hope this works. I may have to restart this screen capture, but okay, cool. It did load. That was a surprise. So yeah, so let's go ahead and I'll just show this quickly and then we can continue with some questions. What I have here is my Rails application running on port 3000. And you can see I've got some products that I've already filled in. I'm going to go ahead and log in now. This is a real device here, Nexus S. I'm going to log into this server. And remember, I set my partition value to just return a hard-coded string, Lars. So I have to log in with that same user. And I'll just put in a dummy password here. And so now you see when I log in, I've got all the products like I normally did. So because I was using plugins, I didn't actually write a source adapter. I just went and used the RhoConnect plugin in my Rails application to fetch all this data. Now we'll do the push part. So the really cool thing is, first thing I want to do is I want to check, did I set up push properly? And this will be when you first set it up and you're kind of getting familiar with it, you want to do this. I'll go in my RhoConnect console to the new user that was created here, Lars. And I'll see there's a new registered device. And so you can actually see, for some reason it didn't, oh, I missed a step, yes. I need to actually install the Android driver here. So let me go ahead and kill that. This is good. We get to kind of see some live debugging here. One step I did miss, a critical step. When you have the installer here, there's a RhoConnect Push service. So the push service is a multi-tenant service. You can actually have multiple applications installed on your device, and they can use the same push service. So that means I have to install the push service APK onto my device. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick here. So I'll just go demos, RhoConnect Push service, and it's just an APK. And then if you have a Windows Mobile or Windows CE device, you have a cab file to install. And then what I'm going to do is just uninstall the application so I can set it up from a fresh environment. Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and start this again. It'll build much faster this time since it's already compiled it.
So that service that's running in the background, can you check the status of the service from your application to ensure that it's running?
Yeah, so what actually happens is there's when you enable the native extension, when the application starts up and you sync the first time, it's going to register with this intent. So it's on Android, it's implemented as an intent. And then it'll give you an error if it's not able to find it, or if I was looking at the logs here, I'd see there was an error, and I could handle that in my sync callback. Okay, so now we've got our application here. I'll go ahead and log in again as the same user. Okay. So now we can see that my device has registered properly. If you, to verify that it is correct, you should see device push type is RhoConnect Push, and you'll see a long kind of GUID string here for the device pin. So this means that this device is set up to do RhoConnect Push. And I can actually test this without doing anything else right now, just by using the RhoConnect console. So let's say I want to test push like hello world, and I don't want to sync anything or play a file. If I had a media file in my app, I could play that. Let's go ahead and send ping, and there we go. So now we know that RhoConnect Push is set up properly, and I can deliver messages to the device. So the coolest part is now I can go ahead and change any of these records. Like let's say, oh, I don't want to have the Galaxy S3 here. I'll just go ahead and delete that. Well, on the app, all I have to do is refresh the page, and you can see it's gone. So I didn't have to manually do a sync or do anything. What happened in the background was the Rails application made an update through the plugin to my RhoConnect app, and then my RhoConnect app, because push notify was turned on, automatically sent a push message to the device. And so that way the device knows, oh, there's a change for products, come and get the changes. So it's very important though to note that we don't actually deliver the changes for the product in the push message, and that's very much by design. We want to make the push protocol very lightweight. It's just an informational messaging protocol. The actual data changes happen when the device processes the push message and then does a sync based on what the message tells it to do. So this goes two ways. I can create a record from the device. This isn't using push obviously, but I can create like a, say there's a Nexus S 2, for example, and then I can create that record and then sync it. So now my Rails app, I just refresh the page and I'll see it. So the plugin facilitates bidirectional communication. And you can do things like edit an existing record. Let's say I want to change the price here of the iPhone 5 to $199. They came out with a new one, so now it's cheaper. And that will send a push message. I can refresh the page, and you can see it's automatically updated. So pretty much instant changes. And of course, in my real application, I can handle the push message callback. So when the data actually changes, I can implement the sync callback. So when the data actually changes from the sync and it calls my method, I can do something like update the page dynamically. Let's say I wanted to just replace this div with the proper data. So that way you wouldn't have to, in my demo here I'm kind of refreshing the whole page, but you wouldn't have to refresh it if you handle the sync callback. So that's how you can get bidirectional changes, and you can get real-time updates in your roads or row elements application using RhoConnect Push. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
All right, Laura. So hey, that was pretty neat. We do have a couple of questions. So I know we showed Nexus S with Android, but is there anything different if the client is iOS, or the question was particularly about iOS, but I want to kind of expand the question on the client side. Is there any uniqueness or different things we need to do on the different platforms to handle the push messages or interaction with push?
That's a good question. We currently support RhoConnect Push on Android and then our Windows platforms. So it's not currently supported on iOS. We are still sort of looking at the use cases and to see if there's a lot of customer demand for it. We do have plans to add it eventually, but At the moment, it is not supported. But with regards to various changes that you need to do in the different platforms, it should be completely transparent. You wouldn't have to do anything differently if you're writing a Windows mobile app or an Android app. It would just, Windows Mobile, you install the cab file, and it would just work the exact same way. So your developer experience, as far as building your application, you wouldn't have to worry about which push technology you're using. You would just set up the RhoConnect Push server once, and then install the push service on the devices. And we do have plans in our next release to make the installation process of the service automatic. So if I'm building an app and I know I'm using RhoConnect Push, it will automatically install the service if it's not there. But today you would have to install it separately.
Okay, so speaking of Microsoft, Val had asked about, he said, you mentioned Microsoft doesn't really have a push technology. Isn't Exchange ActiveSync or EAS just that? Do you know about that particular?
Well, again, it's generic data push. So I can send a generic push message, right, without having, again, these devices are not, most of these devices are not wired up with any user accounts or any email or anything. If you're talking about like a Motorola device that's just used for scanning or inventory, things like that, it's not set up for Microsoft Exchange server. We were just talking about generic data push. A lot of existing push technologies are geared towards, I want to send an SMS, or I want to sync a contact, or I want to sync a calendar or email, right? This is just, I can send any arbitrary push message. So in that terms, it's more along the lines of what Google Cloud Messaging does or Apple Push Notification Service, not necessarily what Exchange ActiveSync does.
Okay. So hey, well, we get to some more questions. Let me. We do have a question we'd like to ask the audience here. Just first question is general. How are you using RhoConnect today? Are you using it, right? You're using it now, currently. Plans to use it in the near future. You're thinking about it, and the last choice is really it's not on your radar scope. So if you can kindly enter your feedback on that, that would be great. Let's see. Another question came from Chris, also a follow-up on iOS. If you need to support iOS, can you have the application use Push for Android and Windows and something else for iOS in the same app? Or if you enable Push, will it just fail on iOS? So I guess what's the behavior on iOS if you enable it?
That's a good question. Yeah. So there's sort of two features that I talked about here. One is, of course, RhoConnect Push. The other is this Push Notify feature. So Push Notify is completely technology independent. It doesn't. It works across all of the different push technologies that we support. So let's say, for example, I had user Lars and I had two devices. One here was my Android device, another was an iPhone 4. The iPhone, if I've set up Apple Push in my RhoConnect app, that iPhone would also receive the same push message as the Android device. So RhoConnect is smart enough to say, okay, depending on the device push type, I'm going to use a different push technology to actually send the message. So you could absolutely mix and match. I could have, in the same RhoConnect app, I could have devices, BlackBerry devices, Windows mobile devices, and Android devices and iOS devices, all using, using across those devices. They're using 3 different push technologies, and it'll just work. So the RhoConnect server decides actually at runtime which push technology to use.
Okay. And let's just close that poll. We can share that with the audience there. And let me switch over to this one here. Okay, so another question for the audience about push services. Now that you've heard about it, it's probably a new topic for most people on the call, but just like to get some feedback on that. So one of the questions while people are entering the results on this poll, Lars, has to do with checking to see, I think we talked about it a little bit before, and it's kind of counterintuitive, I guess, to push messages, but if your device or application wants to check to see if the push server is alive, right? How would one go about doing that? Is it something where, what's some different options that developers may have for kind of ensuring the application and push server know the status of each other type of deal?
So the push, that's a great question. The push service is designed to be very tolerant of spotty network connectivity. So you can, if your device goes in airplane mode or you are in an area that does not have good cell network connectivity, it will try to reconnect periodically. And that's configurable as well. You can say, I don't want to try to reconnect every 30 seconds, maybe every 60 seconds or so forth. So you have inside of your application a push callback that you implement that will receive this information about the current status of the push service on the device. So if it's currently offline, you can say, okay, not able to receive updates, and then you can maybe display a manual sync button, for example. In the case that, okay, the push server's offline, do you want to manually check for updates type of thing?
Okay, so the server knows that the device got the message. So if it sent the message while it was, offline, and then becomes online, it will get that message sooner or later.
The server knows if the device is offline, correct. It tracks which devices are connected, and then it also has an expiry for a device. So if a device is connected, but then it doesn't connect for like another year or 30 days or something, it's going to say, okay, this device, we think this device has been turned off or is no longer talking to us.
Okay.
And messages are actually, that's why I mentioned earlier that you need to have Redis running, because the messages are actually queued in Redis. So the device can absolutely be offline, and it'll just receive the message whenever it comes back online and checks the push server for messages.
Got it. Okay. All right. Let's see. Is there any other questions? I don't see any other questions. Let me just get to my last slide, and then I'll thank everybody for joining. Just really quick, I try to do this on every webinar. This is really just kind of a resource, quick tip of the week to kind of complement the topic of the week. And so we've been using this internally in our sales teams. Our software specialists have been using this tool, CouchDB. If you don't know about it, it's a really easy way to get database plus RESTful services, web services on your laptop, etc. And it works quite nicely with RhoConnect. In fact, somebody here, Jeff Paremba, who's been on previous calls, put together the source adapter for RhoConnect that talks to CouchDB. So just wanted to pass that along if you don't know about that already. It's a good kind of tool, even when you're testing this, maybe even when you're in that offline state, you may be traveling and you want to kind of test this whole interaction locally. You could do that with CouchDB. So I just wanted to bring that up. Okay, that was all of the slides that we had in the presentation. Unless, Lars, you have anything else you want to cover?
No, that was my presentation. I really appreciate everyone joining, and I just wanted to quickly mention, as Rob mentioned, we are looking for feedback and suggestions on these webinars. But specific to RhoConnect Push, since it is a new feature and a new sort of product component for us, we're very interested in hearing your feedback. Please post on Launchpad your questions, suggestions, your kind of war stories of using it, and we're very excited and interested in hearing about how you are using the tool and adding this to your RhoConnect application and your mobile applications.
Yeah, thanks, Lars. Actually, there's one other question from Chris that came in while we were talking. If multiple notifications are queued for the same source and a device connects, will it trigger multiple syncs or just a single sync?
That's a good question. Yeah, it doesn't. If it's the same source, it will just trigger it once. If it is multiple sources, then it will trigger it once per source. We do have plans to add a kind of multi-source aggregation, but that requires changes to both the plugins as well as RhoConnect. So we're not. We don't have that ready yet, but we do have plans to add that.
Okay. All right.
Right now.
Sorry, Lars. Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah. So right now it is per source. If you're per model, so if you change one model, it will send one push message.
Okay. All right, great. Any last minute questions? So good timing here. We're almost at the top of the hour, and the world didn't end. So I appreciate everybody joining today, and look forward to seeing you next time. Next week we'll do our last one for the year, which is the native extension walkthrough, and then just a kind of a quick blurb on Launchpad. Lars is very active on Launchpad. So yeah, if you have any questions, please submit it there. We're actively looking at the questions that are posted there, and appreciate your participation in that as well. So Lars, thanks again for joining. Thanks everybody else for joining, and that ends today's webinar.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.